I should have known from the way she said my name, slow, like she was testing its weight, that nothing about her was ever going to stay simple. It started in the quiet corner of that cafe she always chose, the one where the light came in low and golden, catching the dust in the air. She said it reminded her of old film stills. I said nothing, just watched her stir her coffee long after the sugar had dissolved. Her bracelets clicked softly against the cup. She noticed me watching and didn't look away. That was her way. She never hurried a silence. Her name was Maya. Mid-40s. Elegant without trying. The kind of woman who never needed to announce herself. The air just shifted when she entered. Her hair was tied loose, strands escaping near her neck. I noticed too much. The way her thumb traced the rim of her mug, the faint scent of jasmine she probably didn't realize still clung to her coat. I wasn't supposed to see her again after the university closed for summer. She had been my professor once, just long enough for me to memorize her handwriting, the slant of her letters, the notes she left in margins that always sounded like more than feedback. You observe too much. Use it. I guess I did. She looked up at me that afternoon and said, "So, you still bring your camera everywhere?" I nodded. "Old habit. Or an excuse," she said. "For what?" Her smile tilted. "To look without having to explain why." The line hit harder than it should have. Because she was right, I didn't know how to look at her without feeling like I was trespassing. We both laughed then, lightly, to soften what neither of us admitted out loud. It was supposed to be harmless, just coffee, two adults catching up. But when her knee brushed mine under the small table, neither of us moved away. The moment hung there, balanced between what it was and what it might turn into. She shifted slightly, pretending to fix her sleeve. I watched her fingers, steady, practiced, and thought how easily she carried herself, how she never apologized for taking up space. "You still photograph people?" she asked. "Sometimes," I said. "Mostly the ones who don't realize they're being seen." Her eyes met mine. "Dangerous habit." The air between us thickened, not in any loud way, just slower, denser. A few seconds stretched too long. The cafe's low hum disappeared. Even the clinking of cups seemed far away. She looked down first. "We should order something to eat," she murmured, though her voice had gone softer, almost uncertain. "Sure," I said, but neither of us moved. Her phone buzzed on the table. She ignored it. I wanted to say something, anything, to keep her eyes on me. Instead, I asked the first thing that came out. "Do you ever miss teaching?" Her lips curved, but not into a smile. "Sometimes I miss the control." Then, after a pause, "Sometimes I don't." That pause lingered, long enough for me to realize she wasn't talking about classrooms anymore. The waitress came by, breaking the spell, and Maya's tone shifted instantly. Polite, distant, professional. I watched her slip back into composure, like someone buttoning a coat. But when the waitress left, she leaned slightly forward again. Not much, just enough for her perfume to reach me. She traced the edge of the napkin with her fingertip and said, "You shouldn't take everything I say so seriously." I wasn't planning to. Her gaze lifted, steady now, daring. "Good," she said. "Because it's just a game." I almost smiled. "What kind?" Her eyes didn't flinch. "The kind that only works if you pretend not to care." Before I could answer, the door opened behind me, the bell's sharp ring cutting through the hush, and her expression changed, just slightly. Whatever she saw over my shoulder made her draw her hand back, slow and deliberate. "Don't turn around," she said quietly. And just like that, the air between us shifted again, colder this time, but alive. The next time I saw her, it wasn't planned. It never really was. Maya was at the gallery downtown, standing in front of one of my photographs. The one I'd taken a year ago without thinking, of an empty cafe table. 2 cups. One untouched. One half-finished. I hadn't realized until that moment that I'd been trying to capture her absence. She turned when she heard me behind her. "You always appear when I least expect it," she said softly. "I could say the same." Her eyes flicked toward the photo again. "I like this one," she murmured. "It feels unfinished." "Maybe that's why it works," I said. She smiled faintly, but there was something in her expression, a weariness that didn't belong to the confident woman I remembered. When I asked if she was okay, she hesitated. "Just tired," she said. "Long week." I almost asked more, but she was already turning toward the next wall. Her dress brushed against my arm as she passed, light as static. I felt the warmth of her skin through the thin fabric. She didn't apologize, and I didn't step back. Maya had been divorced 2 years now. I'd heard that from a colleague, not from her. When we met again, she still wore her wedding ring on some days, none on others, maybe out of habit, maybe to see who noticed. I noticed everything. The faint line at the corner of her mouth when she forced a smile. The way her voice softened when she said my name. We stood too close for too long, pretending to look at photographs neither of us were really seeing. "I shouldn't have come," she said eventually, arms crossed like a shield. "You say that every time. And yet," she said, glancing at me, "you never stop showing up." There was no accusation in her voice, just quiet recognition. "Does it bother you?" I asked. Her answer came after a breath. "No. That's what bothers me." Her honesty hit harder than I expected. She looked away then, pretending to study a portrait across the room. I followed her gaze, but my attention stayed on the way her fingers played absently with her necklace, a nervous gesture she probably didn't even realize she was making. When she finally turned back to me, her voice was lower. "You know what people would say, right? If they saw us like this." "I'm not sure I care," I said. Her lips parted, almost into a reply, then closed again. A pulse flickered at her throat. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The air between us felt charged, as if the quiet itself had become a third presence. She reached out, maybe to adjust my collar, maybe for something else, and her hand rested on my shoulder longer than necessary. Her thumb brushed the fabric, a slow, uncertain movement. "You shouldn't make this harder than it already is," she whispered. "I'm not trying to." Her hand lingered, then fell away. But the space where her touch had been stayed alive, burning quietly beneath the surface. As she stepped back, her eyes softened. "You really don't know when to stop, do you? Maybe I don't want to." Something in her expression shifted. Not quite a smile, not quite surrender. She looked at me for a long, unguarded moment, then said, "Careful, Armin. Games like this, they tend to rewrite their own rules." And before I could respond, she turned and started walking toward the exit, slow, deliberate, waiting just long enough to see if I would follow. The rain started without warning. One of those sudden, heavy Karachi rains that made the air smell like dust and salt. Maya and I had ducked beneath the awning outside the gallery, laughing as water splattered the edge of our shoes. "Guess the universe wants us to stay a little longer," I said. She glanced at me, a half smile, almost affectionate. "You think everything's the universe's idea. Then what's yours?" "My idea," she said, brushing her damp hair back, "was to leave before this got complicated." Her words hung there, half drowned by the sound of the rain. She was close, too close, and for once, she didn't move away. Her perfume was faint now, washed by the weather, but her nearness felt electric. I could see the tiny droplets clinging to her lashes, the way her breath came slower than usual. I wanted to touch her, not with confidence, but with hesitation, like someone tracing the edge of something breakable. Then her phone buzzed. Once. Twice. She flinched, just slightly, and stepped back. Her screen lit up with a name I didn't recognize. She silenced it too quickly. "Work?" I asked. "Something like that," she said, pocketing the phone. "Someone who still thinks I owe explanations." There was an ache in her tone. Not anger, not sadness, but the exhaustion of someone who'd been misunderstood too many times. Before I could ask more, a familiar voice called out from across the street. "Professor Malik?" We both froze. It was Lena, one of her colleagues. Umbrella in hand, smiling, unaware of the quiet panic in Maya's eyes. "Armin?" Lena said, surprised. "Didn't know you two were still in touch." Maya recovered faster than I did. "Oh, Armin was just showing me his new work," she said easily, as if rehearsed. "We ran into each other by chance." "Nice," Lena said, glancing between us. "Well, I'll see you Monday, Maya." As soon as she walked off, the silence between us thickened. Maya's shoulders dropped, the facade gone. "She'll tell someone," she said quietly. "Not to be cruel. Just because people talk." I nodded, not trusting myself to say anything that wouldn't sound like an excuse. The rain slowed, but neither of us moved. When she looked at me again, her guard had cracked just enough to show something raw beneath. "You make it hard to remember why I'm supposed to keep my distance." I took a step closer, barely. "Then don't." Her breath caught. "You don't know what that would cost me." "Maybe I do," I said. "Maybe that's why I can't stop." For a moment, she didn't breathe. The space between us shrank until her coat brushed my arm. Her hand lifted halfway, as if to touch my face, then faltered. The rain dripped from the awning in a steady rhythm, her hesitation matching its pace. She whispered, "You shouldn't look at me like that. Then stop giving me reasons to." Her eyes softened, conflicted, part longing, part restraint. For one impossible second, her lips were inches from mine, close enough for the warmth of her breath to blur the distance. Then she pulled back, barely shaking her head. "Not yet," she said, voice trembling. "Not like this." But as we stood there, the rain still falling, she didn't step away again, and that, somehow, felt even more dangerous. It happened a week later. Late evening, her apartment, light spilling from the kitchen like warmth that didn't quite reach the corners. She'd asked me to drop off the prints for my latest project. Nothing more, nothing implied. But the second she opened the door, barefoot, hair undone, that light collapsed between us. "You can just leave them on the table," she said, voice softer than usual. I nodded, but neither of us moved. The air had that quiet that lives right before a storm, thick, waiting. She turned away first, crossing to pour herself a glass of wine. "You're early," she said, like small talk might anchor her. "You sound disappointed," I said. "I sound realistic." I should have laughed, but something in her tone stopped me. She looked tired, not from the day, from holding herself together. I set the envelope down. "Maya." Her name barely left my mouth before she turned, sharp. "Don't." But her voice cracked on it, and that broke something in me. I stepped closer, not touching, just near enough to feel her tension shift. "You keep pretending this doesn't matter," I said quietly. "That it's nothing." She shook her head, almost to herself. "It's not that simple, Armin. You think you understand, but you don't. You get to walk away from this." "I don't." "Then tell me to go." Her eyes met mine, steady, pained. "You wouldn't." We stood like that, breaths tangled, neither willing to move first. The window rattled from the wind, a low hum filling the silence. "I hate that you make me feel." She stopped herself, shaking her head. "You shouldn't be here." I stepped closer. "Then why did you open the door?" Her jaw tightened. She didn't answer. A strand of hair had fallen across her cheek. Without thinking, I reached out and brushed it back. My fingers lingered longer than they should have. Her eyes fluttered shut for a heartbeat, not from surprise, but from surrender she didn't want to name. "Stop," she whispered, but her voice had no weight left in it. "Say it like you mean it," I said. She exhaled, shaky, a sound between anger and longing. "You don't know what you're doing to me." Her confession hit like heat between us, unplanned, irreversible. I moved closer, slow enough for her to stop me. She didn't. Her back met the edge of the table, her hands gripping it for balance. The scent of wine in her skin filled the air, jasmine and something warm underneath. "You're too young," she said, breathless. "You keep saying that," I murmured, leaning in, "and it keeps sounding less like a reason and more like an excuse." She laughed, short, uneven. "You think this is funny?" "No," I said. "I think it's real." Her hand came up then, trembling slightly, resting against my chest as if to push me away, but she didn't. Her thumb traced the line of my collarbone, barely there. The world felt narrow to that point of contact. Her breath, her hand, my pulse. "Tell me to stop," I said. She looked up, eyes shining, torn between every version of herself she'd spent years protecting. "I can't," she whispered. Our faces were inches apart, her breath warm against my mouth, when the doorbell rang. The sound hit like cold air, shattering everything. She froze. I stepped back, pulse hammering. Her voice, when it came, was barely audible. "Don't move." And then she turned toward the door. The knock came again, firmer this time. Maya's hand hovered over the doorknob, then froze. She turned to me, eyes wide in a way I hadn't seen before. Not fear exactly, but exposure. "Don't say a word," she whispered. I nodded, barely breathing. When she opened the door, a man stood there, mid-40s, rain-soaked, holding an umbrella like it was a prop he'd forgotten how to use. His voice was quiet but edged. "You weren't answering my calls." Her ex-husband. I knew it before she said anything. I'd seen his name flash on her phone that day outside the gallery. "Meher," she said evenly. "It's late." He looked past her, into the apartment. His eyes landed on the envelope of photos on the table. On me. "Working late then?" he said. Maya didn't flinch. "Armin was just leaving." I opened my mouth, then shut it again. She didn't look at me, not once. It was like watching her slip back into an older version of herself, one built entirely from restraint. Meher stepped inside without being invited, water dripping from his coat. "You said you needed space," he said. "Didn't realize that meant company." "Meher, stop." He turned to me. "You're one of her students, right?" "Was," I said quietly. His laugh was small, cruel. "Right. Was." Something flickered across Maya's face, shame, anger, something harder to name. "You should go," she said to me, voice tight. But I didn't move. Not yet. I looked at her, really looked, the way her hands were trembling at her sides, the way she kept her chin high anyway. "Maya," I said, "you don't have to, please." That single word was enough. It wasn't a plea, it was a boundary. I stepped past them, the air between us thick with unspoken things. As I reached the door, Meher's voice followed me. "You always did like admiration," he said to her. "Guess you found someone young enough to still believe you're perfect." I turned back before I could stop myself, anger flashing hot. But Maya caught my arm, a touch quick and desperate. Her fingers dug into my sleeve. "Don't," she said under her breath. Her eyes met mine for half a second, full of something I couldn't read, something both protective and broken. I left. I had to. Outside, The rain had eased into a drizzle. I stood there, soaked, heartbeats still echoing her touch. Minutes passed. Then her door opened again. She stepped out, coat thrown over her shoulders. "He's gone," she said. "I shouldn't have stayed," I said. "You shouldn't have come," she whispered. Then softer. "But I'm glad you did." I laughed once, hollow. "That's not fair." "None of this is." She looked up at me then, all the practice calm gone. "He thinks I never moved on," she said. "And he's right. I didn't. I just misplaced where I was supposed to." Her confession hit harder than any accusation could have. She stepped closer, close enough that her breath brushed my chin. "I've spent years hiding behind control," she said. "You make me forget I ever had any." Her hand lifted, fingertips tracing my jaw, slow and trembling. "Tell me this ends here," she said. I couldn't. The silence between us said everything. What we both knew, what neither could undo. Finally, she exhaled. "Then come inside," she whispered. "But only if you understand there's no pretending after tonight." The apartment was quiet when we stepped back inside, the kind of silence that feels alive, waiting to see what you'll do next. The rain had stopped, but the air still carried its damp chill. Maya closed the door behind us, her hand trembling slightly on the latch. Neither of us spoke. Her coat slipped from her shoulders, falling in a soft heap to the floor. She didn't move to pick it up. I could hear her breathing. Shallow, uneven, the sound louder than it should have been in that small space. She walked past me to the window, looking out at the streetlights still flickering in the puddles below. Her reflection glimmered faintly in the glass, and for a moment I saw what she must have seen: two people who had already crossed a line, even if they hadn't touched. "You should go," she said finally, voice low but unconvincing. "Do you want me to?" She turned then, slowly. Her eyes met mine, and whatever answer she had faltered before it reached her lips. "This," she began, then stopped. "It's not just a bad idea, Armin. It's—" She trailed off, pressing her fingers to her temple. "I can't be the woman who ruined you." I took a step closer, careful, deliberate. "You're not ruining me. You're the only thing that feels honest." She laughed under her breath, a sound that wasn't amusement so much as surrender. "You say that like it's a compliment. It is." Her eyes softened, searching mine for a lie and finding none. She took a half step toward me, then froze again. "You're too young to know what this costs." "Then teach me," I said. That broke something in her. The careful restraint, the practiced composure, it all slipped. She closed the space between us until I could feel the warmth radiating off her skin, her breath brushing my neck. "Don't do this," she whispered, though she was the one who'd moved first. "I'm already doing it." Her hand came up, hesitated midair, then rested lightly against my chest. I covered it with mine, feeling her pulse hammer beneath her palm. The world seemed to narrow to that single touch, the faint tremor in her fingers, the rise and fall of her breath, the heat of her skin through fabric. "If we start this," she said, "we don't get to go back." I nodded. "I know." Her eyes held mine for a long, fragile second, everything we'd avoided saying now alive in that silence. Then she leaned in, so close her forehead nearly touched mine. "I was afraid you'd make me feel alive again," she murmured. "And I was right." The words hung there, not a confession, but a reckoning. I could have kissed her then. She could have let me. But instead, she pressed her hand to my cheek, thumb tracing the corner of my mouth, and whispered, "Remember me like this, before we forget who we are." Then she stepped back. Just one step, but it was enough to shift everything. We stood there, still breathing the same air, knowing the decision had already been made, not with a kiss, but with restraint. In that moment, I understood, Love wasn't always the act of crossing a line. Sometimes it was the unbearable ache of stopping just before it. Morning crept in softly, the pale light stretching across the wooden floor of Maya's apartment. She stood by the window again, a mug cupped in both hands, hair loose and tangled. I watched her from the couch, half awake, half afraid to move, as if the smallest sound would break whatever fragile peace the night had left behind. We hadn't crossed the line. Not really. But something deeper had happened. A truth spoken without words, a choice made in silence. She turned when she felt me watching. "You didn't sleep," she said gently. "Did you?" Her lips curved faintly. "I stopped trying a long time ago." I sat up, running a hand through my hair. "Do you regret it?" "Which part?" she asked, though I already knew she understood. "Letting me stay." She took a slow sip from her mug, then walked toward me. "No," she said softly, "but I do regret all the years I spent pretending I didn't need this." When she sat beside me, our knees brushed, light, familiar, inevitable. She didn't pull away this time. The air between us was still thick with everything unsaid, but it no longer felt heavy. "I used to think love only belonged to people who had time to waste," she said quietly. "But now, I just think it belongs to whoever's brave enough to feel it." I smiled, eyes on her hands. "And are we brave?" She reached out, lacing her fingers through mine. "I don't know," she said, "but we're here." That was enough. Outside, the rain had started again, softer now, rhythmic against the glass. She leaned her head against my shoulder, the warmth of her skin seeping through my shirt. The moment felt like something ordinary dressed in honesty. No grand declarations, no promises we couldn't keep. Just her breath, steady against my neck, and the quiet understanding that whatever this was, it had already changed us both. "You know people will talk," I said after a while. She smiled into my shoulder. "Let them. They always find a story to tell. At least this one's ours." Her thumb brushed the back of my hand, a slow, unconscious rhythm that felt more intimate than anything we hadn't done. "You could still walk away," she said softly, though there was no challenge in her tone, only care. "I could," I said, "but I'd still end up here." She lifted her head then, looking at me, really looking. And for once, neither of us hid behind restraint. Her eyes softened, the faintest smile breaking through. "Then stay," she whispered. So I did. We sat there for a long time, saying nothing, watching the city blur through the rain. Her fingers tightened around mine once, and I realized this wasn't about defiance or risk or what anyone else might think. It was about the quiet, human miracle of two people finding warmth in a world that had almost convinced them not to try. She exhaled, content. "Maybe it was never a game," she said. "Maybe it was just real," I answered. And when she leaned in, resting her forehead against mine, everything felt simple again, the way truth sometimes does, once you stop running from it. Did you enjoy the story? What kind of stories would you like to hear next?